Today is October 11th. I stopped in my narrative yesterday at the point where I was talking about trying to get a motion faxed over to Judge, I believe it was Judge Alicia Nakata at the time. Basically to prevent me from going to jail for failure to appear on a court hearing. And the court hearing that was scheduled was the one for the grand auto theft. And I did not, obviously, commit grand auto theft. But it was a way to force me to stay in that state and to not leave. They basically told me that I could not leave the state for 1 full year. and I was told I had to appear at all these hearings. It interfered, as I've already described, with the job that I had applied for and gotten. So basically, I was really being held hostage again. And it was all on false charges. It ruined, it was done the night before I was about to start training for my new job. And they could have chosen a different time to arrest me, and they didn't. They waited for that time specifically, so they deliberately did want to interfere with my work. It was to prevent me from traveling outside of the state. And during that time, they began torturing me again. They had not, in Wenatchee, started anything up, like on a day-to-day basis. But when I got back from Seattle, that's what they did. I'd had sort of the isolated incidences in Seattle, which I made a restraining order for. The other thing that that it accomplished was to make me look bad on an international level. And it gave the police an opportunity to go through my purse and to steal evidence from my webcam, from my video cam, which they knew I had, that proved my visits with my son were not going the way that the visitation monitor was claiming they were going. And the visitation monitor at that time was Sue. Excuse me. I'm going to have something to drink while I talk because I have a little bit of something in my throat. So, my information was obviously deleted. And at that point, from that point on, actually, it was when I got back from Seattle. That's when, it was only a little bit later, after that point, that the Attorney General, Mary Ann McIntosh, who is related by marriage to the Chief of Police in Wenatchee, Jones, she requested from the judge an order to block me from documenting anything by photograph or videotape. And I, at that time, was starting to catch evidence of torture to my son. And as soon as they basically tried to punish me with that, and the judge went along with it, which was really, I remember his demeanor when he went along with it. It wasn't like he was having a hard time or really wrestling with the idea. He didn't give me a chance to argue as to why it was necessary at all. He looked like he was very contributory towards the idea. I never had the impression that he thought that he was concerned about the actual safety of my son. And the fact that he was so eager to have an order like that made when it put my son in danger and put me in danger if I tried to document things. I knew as soon as he did that, by the way he was acting, that he and Marianne probably had a private conversation about it, or privately agreed to do this. Through someone, they all agreed to have this done. And it was protecting the criminals who were responsible for the torture of my son. And since Marianne McIntosh's daughter had married the chief of police in the town, it's really, and since the police were partly contributing to some of the things that had happened to me and my son, it really was not, it's not hard to understand what kinds of corruption and motive there was for doing this. But that came about a little bit later, because what I was talking about last was how I was in Bainbridge and Seattle, and I was trying to fax something over. I was in Seattle, actually. I was at a coffee place, and I asked this woman if she would please fax something to me because it was an emergency, and she agreed to do it. But when I was calling on my cell phone for the law firm that had been assigned to me, they knew that I was trying to fax something. I said, I have evidence. First they said, oh, don't send anything. The lawyer will just tell the judge. And I said, and I know how court how court goes, like what is required of court typically. And if you have a very lenient judge, you might be able to, a public defender could possibly go to that judge and say, this is what is going on with my client. And that's it. And the judge will just take the attorney's word for it. However, a lot of judges will take just a statement like that without any kind of evidence to back it up as an excuse to say, well, that's what you say, but I don't have anything that shows me that this is the truth. So the judge can very easily wiggle out of giving an extension by saying, well, you claim that she's ill, but how do we know that she's not lying? And so typically they would want something that shows that there was a problem, like a copy of a police report, copy of something from the emergency room admission, something like that, like any kind of possible, wherever possible, some sort of a document that shows that you're not making things up. And a good public defender knows this. A good public defender knows that if you're actually zealously defending your client, you don't just leave things to guess and estimation and to whatever the judge wants to do, when you know that a judge is going to want something documented. Or that, basically a judge will freely decide against you. If they don't like you, they will do anything they can to decide against you in every way, unless you have something to put into the public record that shows, that makes them look suspicious if they do decide against you. Because if I put in an emergency room report and a police report and then explain that's why I need a little bit of an extension, then if they choose not to do that, it makes them look suspicious on the record. So, here this woman had this documentation, and why didn't you give an extension? You gave her a failure to appear, but she had a good reason not to appear. It was an emergency. So I didn't accept what the law firm was telling me. And the law firm was telling me, oh, well, he'll just tell the judge what you're saying. And I then had a sense of panic, because I knew right then and there that my law firm was trying to screw me over and was going to try to give the judge leeway to do something like that. And I said, no, I'm faxing over some documents, and I want him to take those to court. So I asked for the fax number, and I tried faxing it over, and they knew I only had a limited amount of time before the hearing. And that law firm turned off their fax machine. so that I couldn't send it. And then I called again. And I kept calling, and it was basically going to nothing, and then they weren't answering their phone, or I was getting put to voicemail. They weren't picking up the phone at all. So I think what I actually had to do is I think I called the prosecuting attorney that was against me, or I called a different law firm, and I said, I'm trying to fax something over to my lawyer, and I just talked to them, and now all of a sudden nobody's answering the phone and the fax lines are down. And I think I asked somebody to check and see if it was working for them, or if they could, or could I fax it to them. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I double checked on it. And then after I did that, then, and only then, and I sent several emails. I documented what I was trying to do by sending email to that law firm, and also sending email to the court saying, I have documentation to show such and such. And I'm trying to send it, but now all of a sudden I can't get it through. But I am attempting to send this. And I believe that possibly I faxed it to the courthouse as well, because I couldn't get through to my public defender. But really you should be sending that to your public defender, and then they take that in their hands to the courthouse. But I was trying to make sure that it was covered. So I did all those things, and then at the very last minute, after I'd done some of these other things and gone to other people, then that law firm said go ahead and try to send it, and then my fax went through. But it was at the very last minute, and I don't believe that if I had not been persistent, I don't think that that fax would have gone through to my law firm at all. And I could have ended up in jail. So after this happened, and I also noticed the tone in their voice when I was talking to them, I could tell that they didn't like me, and there's something not right about the firm, the people I was dealing with. And that was when I knew I have to get a different public defender, because they just tried to obstruct me from getting evidence into the record to keep me out of jail, you know, on a failure to appear. And then with all of that information, there really wasn't much wiggle room. So then the judge said, okay, I could have an extension, because you can't, you know, I had documentation that showed I was not trying to miss the hearing. I was trying to get back. And this is all happening, by the way, because CPS did not arrange for my transportation or my hotel, and yet they told me to put myself in dangerous circumstances, or they would not reschedule a psychological hearing for me. So this was all because of the state of Washington. And when they accepted that, you know, what I gave them. And then I got on a bus from there, and I arranged to get back home. But it was, you know, basically I had to go through all of that, and just knew then that I needed to, you know, find something else that was going to work, you know, for the future. And once I got back to Wenatchee, that's when I believe I somehow got assistance, or somebody helped me pay for a hotel. Because I couldn't go back to the people that I had just reported was that household of 3 men that I was staying with. And, you know, the one man, as I've already described, that I had reported, was, his father was, I actually think that I said possibly Air Force, but I think he was Army. The man that I made a report against, or that his dad was Army.